He called her a financial liability and gave her 24 hours to leave the house she had paid for herself. What did he not know? She was hiding a fortune of $60 million and a plan to teach him the true price of betrayal. Ellen Harper could still smell the antiseptic clinging to her soul. At 50, that scent wasn't just a detail of her workplace. It was the essence of her life, a blend of urgency, care, and sacrifice. As head nurse, she orchestrated the chaotic symphony of a major Seattle hospital with a composure that many admired but few understood. That calm stemmed from a deeper purpose, one that lived beyond the sterile white corridors. It lived at home, and it had a name: Nathan Caldwell. 10 years her junior, Nathan was the sun around which Ellen deliberately orbited. When they met, he was a young man brimming with ambition, but with empty pockets and an uncertain future. Ellen, already established, saw in him a spark worth nurturing. And so she did. For her, love was a verb, an ongoing act. She didn't just love him, she built him. The hardest choice, one that still drew a quiet sigh on sleepless nights, was selling her parents' house. That craftsman bungalow in Capitol Hill wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was the last physical remnant of her childhood, the scent of her mother's blueberry muffins on Sunday mornings, the sound of her father's newspaper rustling on the porch. Every cent from the sale went not into a savings account for her own security, but into Nathan's law school tuition. It was the foundation for his future. While Nathan buried himself in case law and dreamed of courtrooms, Ellen immersed herself in a grueling routine. Double shifts became her norm. She swapped day for night so often her body clock frayed, but she kept the bills paid. Friends invited her for coffee, weekend getaways, or just to live a little. "Can't right now," she'd reply with a tired but genuine smile. "Nathan's in his final year. I've got to make sure nothing derails him." She was his backbone, the invisible architect of his career. Every suit he bought, every textbook, every conference fee passed through the filter of her sacrifice. She gave up a geriatric certification she'd longed for, postponed replacing her aging Honda, and forgot what it was like to buy clothes that weren't scrubs. She remembered his graduation night with painful clarity. Nathan, radiant on the stage, diploma in hand like a trophy. In the audience, Ellen clapped with her hands and her heart, filled with a pride that consumed her. It was his victory, but her triumph. That night, he kissed her and said, voice thick with emotion, "I'll never forget. This is all because of you. You're the woman of my life, my rock." His words were a balm for her sleepless nights, a salve for her aching back, a justification for every sacrifice. She believed with every fiber of her being that her investment wasn't financial but emotional, a partnership built for life. The years that followed seemed to validate her gamble. Nathan, with the path she paved, began practicing law. At first, clients were scarce, the income modest. Ellen remained the main breadwinner. The condo they lived in, a comfortable place she'd chosen and paid for with her overtime sweat, was in his name. "It's simpler this way, honey," he'd argued at the time with logic that seemed reasonable. "Tax stuff easier at the courthouse, trust me." And she did. Trust was the air she breathed in their relationship. She didn't notice, or perhaps didn't want to notice, the subtle shifts. The way he started calling the condo my place, how conversations about our plans became about my career. He began attending legal networking events, dinners, and cocktail parties where she was rarely invited. "It's boring, babe, just shop talk," he'd say, and she, exhausted from hospital shifts, would agree. She settled for hearing his recaps, being the silent listener to his victories, not realizing she was being slowly pushed from the center of his life to the edges. Ellen rationalized it all. It was natural for him to focus so much. Law demanded networking, a polished image. She, with her practical scrubs and no-nonsense style, might not fit into that world of appearances. Her world was different, saving lives, holding hands in final moments, comforting desperate families. They were separate worlds, but she believed love was the bridge connecting them. While she took pride in having built the man he'd become, she didn't see that he was starting to resent the woman she remained. Her sacrifices, once seen as acts of love, were reframed by him as a silent debt, a burden he no longer wanted in his new, elevated status. And Ellen, lost in her devotion, didn't hear the bridge crumbling beneath her. The news hit Ellen like a terminal diagnosis, not in a formal boardroom with handshakes and paperwork, but in a hurried hallway exchange, a footnote to a chaotic day. Budget cuts, Ellen. The new board wants to trim payroll. They're prioritizing younger staff, you get it. The hospital director's voice was clinical, devoid of the empathy she'd poured into those same walls for 3 decades. Forced retirement. The term was a cruel euphemism for firing. She wasn't retiring, she was being discarded. At 50, with a lifetime of practical expertise, she was suddenly obsolete. She drove home in a daze, Seattle's traffic blurring around her like a silent film. Horns, brake lights, faceless drivers. None of it reached her. Her mind was trapped in the deafening silence of her future. The hospital wasn't just a job, it was her identity, her sanctuary, where she was indispensable. Now, she wasn't. But there was one comfort, one certainty keeping her steady. Nathan. He'd understand. He, more than anyone, knew the value of her work, the depth of her dedication. He'd hold her, tell her they'd be okay, that they'd face this together. After all, it was his turn to be her rock. Entering the condo, she found him in the home office he'd set up in one of the bedrooms. He was on the phone, voice sharp and confident, negotiating a case. He gestured with a designer pen, his expensive watch glinting under the desk lamp. Seeing her, he raised a finger for silence and continued his call for several minutes. Ellen stood in the doorway, feeling like an intruder in her own home. The antiseptic smell she carried clashed with the leather and polished wood of his office. When he finally hung up, he didn't ask about her day. "I need quiet, Ellen," he said, irritation in his tone. "I'm closing a big client." "Nathan, we need to talk," she said, her voice shakier than intended. "Something happened at the hospital." He leaned back in the leather chair, a chair she'd paid for in 12 credit card installments years ago, and looked at her. There was no warmth in his gaze, just a cold calculation, as if she were opposing counsel. She spilled it all, the hallway conversation, the budget cuts, the forced retirement. Her words stumbled out, heavy with a pain she could barely name. She waited for a gesture, a word of comfort, anything to anchor her in this storm of uncertainty. Instead, a cutting silence followed. Nathan didn't move. His eyes scanned her face, not with compassion, but with a brutal, quick assessment. He didn't see her pain, he saw a problem, a financial one. "So that's it? It's over?" he asked, his voice empty of emotion. "No more salary? No health insurance?" "Nathan, I was fired," she repeated, disbelief mixing with her pain. "You don't get it. My world just collapsed." "I get it perfectly," he said, standing. He paced the room, hands in the pockets of his tailored slacks. He didn't look at her. He looked at the walls, the furniture, as if reappraising their value. "I get that I'm now the only income in this house. I get that my expenses are about to go up. I get that the lifestyle I've worked so hard to build is at risk." The word "I" echoed in the condo's silence. A chill started at the base of Ellen's spine, spreading through her body. The man she'd sacrificed her dreams for was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a ruthless accountant, tallying losses. "We'll figure it out," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I can find something else, maybe teach." He laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive sound. "Teach? Ellen, wake up. The world's moved on. Who's going to hire a 50-year-old nurse? You've become a burden. A financial deadweight I'm not willing to carry." Each word hit like a physical blow. Burden. The woman who'd lifted him from nothing was now a liability. The pain in her chest was so intense, she gripped the doorframe to stay upright. She watched him walk to the window, staring out at Seattle's glowing skyline, a city that for him meant opportunity, and for her now only emptiness. Then he turned and delivered his verdict, cold as a judge's gavel. "I need this whole condo to myself. I need space, a professional image. That room where you keep your stuff, it's going to be my new office, a proper place for clients. I can't have you moping around here, dragging me down." Ellen couldn't believe what she heard. Reality unraveled into an absurd nightmare. "This room? Nathan, this condo, I paid for it." "It's in my name, Ellen. Legally, it's mine," he shot back, his voice sharp as a blade. "And I need you out. I'm giving you 48 hours. That's enough time to pack and find somewhere to go. Maybe crash with one of your nurse friends. 48 hours, thousands of shifts, the sale of her parents' home, 30 years of devotion, all reduced to 48 hours to vanish." The shock was so deep that tears wouldn't come. There was only a cold, hollow realization settling in. The love of her life wasn't just abandoning her. He was erasing her, as if she were a miscalculation in his ledger of success. He didn't see her anymore. He saw only a dead weight. The condo she'd bought with her sweat, the home she'd built with her love, was now the stage for her deepest humiliation. He wasn't just kicking her out of her home. He was expelling her from the life she'd funded. The next 48 hours unfolded in a haze of disbelief and silent pain. Ellen didn't cry. Her tears seemed frozen in a vast well of hurt that hadn't yet found a way to surface. She moved through the condo like a ghost, her footsteps echoing the emptiness in her chest. Nathan ignored her with chilling efficiency. He left early, returned late, spoke on the phone in hushed tones behind his office door. It was as if she'd already ceased to exist. The condo, once a home, became a hostile territory, a countdown to her eviction. She began packing, not the furniture she'd bought or the decor she'd chosen, but her personal belongings, a few non-scrub clothes, dog-eared nursing textbooks, old photos of her parents. Each item was a shard of a life that now felt like someone else's. Holding a framed photo from their wedding day, her and Nathan smiling, happiness so tangible it hurt to look at, she stared for a long time. No anger yet, just a deep confusion, like an architect watching her carefully built structure collapse without reason. She placed the photo face down in a cardboard box. On the morning of the second day, with the deadline looming, her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, thinking it was a mistake or spam. But the second and third calls pushed her to answer, her voice weary. The caller introduced himself as Mr. Bennett, an attorney handling the estate of one of her former patients. The name he mentioned stopped her mid-step in the hallway, a stack of bed sheets in her arms. Margaret Ellison, Mrs. Ellison. The memory of the woman flooded Ellen's mind with unexpected clarity, a textile industry magnate, reclusive and without direct heirs, who'd spent her final years in and out of the hospital. Ellen had been more than her nurse. During long night shifts, when loneliness and pain were Margaret's cruel companions, Ellen sat by her bedside. They didn't just discuss medications or procedures, they talked about life. Margaret shared stories of her global travels, the fabrics she'd designed, the loves she'd lived. Ellen, in turn, shared pieces of her own story, her devotion to her husband, her deferred dreams. Margaret listened with piercing attention, her sharp eyes seeming to see beyond the words. "You've got a heart too big for a world that's not always kind, dear," she'd said once, gripping Ellen's hand with surprising strength. "Don't let anyone dim your worth." Margaret had passed away just over a month ago. Ellen had felt the loss, but the hospital's grind and her own troubles had swallowed her grief. Now the attorney was on the phone, speaking in legal terms that felt distant. Reading of the will, sole beneficiary, a legacy of gratitude. Ellen wasn't processing it. Her mind was on which budget motel to call, how much money she had to survive the next few weeks. "Miss Harper, are you hearing me?" Bennett's voice pulled her back. "Mrs. Ellison left you her entire estate. After liquidating assets and paying taxes, the net value is $60 million. $60 million. The words hung in the air, meaningless. Ellen leaned against the cold wall, phone pressed to her ear. It was a mistake. A cruel prank. A stress-induced hallucination. "There's got to be a mix-up, Mr. Bennett. I was just her nurse." "No mix-up, Miss Harper," he replied with professional patience. "The will is explicit, drawn up with full clarity. Mrs. Ellison left a letter explaining her reasons. She describes you as the most humane and dignified person she met in her final 15 years. She wanted her money to go to someone who knew the true value of things, not just their price." "Can we schedule a meeting to start the transfer process? Are you free tomorrow?" Ellen hung up in a state of shock that dwarfed everything she'd felt in the past 2 days. The figure on her phone screen seemed unreal. 60 million. Her brain refused to accept it. She looked around at the cardboard boxes holding the remnants of her life, at the closed office door where the man who'd called her deadweight worked to build his own wealth. A laugh escaped her lips, not of joy but of a cosmic irony bordering on madness. At the exact moment she'd been reduced to nothing, stripped of her home, career and dignity, she'd become a multi-millionaire. Margaret's letter, read to her later by Bennett over the phone, grounded her. It wasn't just words, it was a testament. The elderly woman described how Ellen adjusted her pillow without being asked, brought her warm chamomile tea on cold nights, listened to her repeated stories with genuine interest. She cared for my soul when my body was giving up, one passage read. I leave her my fortune not as payment but as a tool for her to build the life she deserves, free from the chains others placed on her. That night, her last in the condo, Ellen didn't sleep. Sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by her boxes, she felt tears finally come. They weren't for Nathan's betrayal, but for overwhelming gratitude to a woman who'd truly seen her. Margaret didn't see the nurse, the wife, the middle-aged woman. She saw Ellen, and in her final act, she'd given her not just financial security but something far more precious, a recognition of her worth. The money was a shield, a fortress, but the validation in that letter was the weapon she'd need to fight. For the first time in years, Ellen began to think not of what she'd lost but of what she could build. The next morning, Ellen woke before dawn. The hard floor had left her body sore, but her mind was startlingly clear. Nathan's deadline loomed in hours. For the first time, the countdown didn't bring panic, but a strange sense of power. She rose, looked at the 3 cardboard boxes holding her old life, and made her first decision in her new existence. She'd take nothing. She'd leave it all behind, not as a victim fleeing, but as a queen abandoning a ruined kingdom. Those objects were steeped in sacrifice, in renunciation. Her new life demanded a clean start, unburdened by the past. She took a long shower, using the expensive cedarwood soap Nathan loved, and she'd always saved to be frugal. She wore her best outfit, a simple but elegant blazer and slacks she'd saved for non-existent special occasions. She styled her hair, applied subtle lipstick. In the mirror, she didn't see the tired nurse or the evicted woman. She saw a stranger with a spark of determination in her eyes she didn't recognize. When Nathan emerged from the bedroom, dressed in one of his impeccable suits, he stopped short at the sight of her. He'd expected tears, maybe begging for more time. Her calm dignity disarmed him. "Your stuff packed?" he asked, trying to sound firm but with a hint of hesitation. "Yes," Ellen replied, her voice steady. "I'm not taking anything." He frowned, confused. "What do you mean? Where are you going?" "Don't worry about me, Nathan. I can take care of myself," she said, her words carrying the weight of decades of self-reliance he'd never bothered to notice. She walked to the door. She didn't look back at the condo she'd paid for or the man she'd loved. Feeling the key in her pocket, she placed it on the entryway table and closed the door behind her without a sound. The soft click of the lock was the most liberating sound she'd ever heard. Outside, the world felt different. Seattle's morning air carried a new scent, not of rain or exhaust, but of possibility. She didn't call a regular cab. She used an app to order a luxury sedan. She wanted comfort, to feel, for once, that she didn't have to choose the cheapest option. The driver, a kind older man, opened the door for her. Sitting on the soft leather seat, Ellen felt the first twinge of a life of her own choosing. Her destination wasn't a friend's couch or a shelter. It was one of Seattle's finest hotels, where a night's stay cost more than her weekly hospital pay. At check-in, the receptionist eyed her with professional courtesy, perhaps curious about the woman without luggage. Ellen paid for a week up front, using a small advance Bennett had arranged. Her room on the 25th floor offered a panoramic view of the city. From above, the skyscrapers, streets, and Puget Sound seemed small, manageable. She stood by the window for nearly an hour, watching the world move beneath her. Her first act wasn't to buy clothes or jewelry, it was to sleep. She slept for 12 hours straight, a deep, dreamless sleep, as if her body and soul were reclaiming 30 years of exhaustion. Waking, she felt a real hunger for life. She ordered room service, a full breakfast with fresh berries, artisanal bread, and orange juice squeezed on site. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, a luxury her hospital routine had never allowed. With a full stomach and a clear mind, she began to act. The inheritance wasn't a lottery ticket for idleness. It was, as Margaret had said, a tool. And Ellen, ever the skilled instrumentator, knew tools required precision. She called Bennett to confirm their meeting. Then she asked for his recommendation for a top-tier financial advisor specializing in large estates. She didn't know stocks, bonds, or tax planning, but she knew how to delegate to experts, a skill honed in the hospital. While awaiting the meetings, Ellen rebuilt herself from the outside in. She visited a high-end salon, getting a modern haircut that framed her face and highlighted her features. She had a manicure, a massage. Then she shopped, not with the frenzy of ostentation, but with the care of crafting a new identity. She bought well-tailored clothes in quality fabrics, classic and timeless, comfortable yet elegant shoes, a leather handbag, not flashy but sophisticated. Each choice was an affirmation. She wasn't dressing to be practical or invisible anymore. She was dressing to be herself. Next, she sought a new home. Seattle, with its painful memories, felt too heavy. She wanted fresh air, a slower pace, but still the amenities of a city. Bellevue, just across Lake Washington, felt right, close enough for ties to Seattle, far enough for a fresh start. With a high-end realtor, she found what she wanted, a cozy house in a leafy upscale neighborhood. Not a garish mansion, but an elegant home with a lush garden and a small fountain, its gentle trickle promising peace. She leased it immediately, paying a year up front for security. In less than a week, Ellen Harper had shed her old life and laid the foundation for a new one, all quietly, with the same discretion and efficiency she'd brought to hospital emergencies. She told no one about the inheritance, not old colleagues, not friends. It was a secret she guarded like treasure, the source of her silent power. She was in a cocoon, transforming, and she knew, with unshakable intuition, that the woman who emerged would be unrecognizable. While Ellen meticulously crafted her new life, Nathan reveled in his supposed freedom. At first he felt relief. The condo's silence, once filled with Ellen's quiet presence, now sounded like success. He turned her former guest room into a grandiose office, buying a mahogany desk, an even pricier leather chair and an espresso machine. He felt like a conqueror in his castle. Ellen's absence was, to him, the removal of a constant reminder of his humble beginnings, a debt he refused to acknowledge. But her absence began to manifest in unexpected ways. The condo, once spotless, gathered a fine layer of disorder. Shirts no longer appeared pressed in his closet. The fridge, once stocked, held only haphazard items he grabbed without planning. Small things, but together they eroded the control he prized. He grew irritated, blaming Ellen in his mind for spoiling him, never admitting she'd been the invisible manager of his life. Curiosity about her whereabouts itched at him. He pictured her crashing with a nurse friend, wallowing in self-pity. Soon she'd call, begging to return, accepting any terms. He rehearsed a magnanimous yet firm speech, maybe offering the tiny storage room by the condo's back entrance, a solution, keeping her close for domestic convenience, but out of his social sphere. The idea pleased him, casting him as both powerful and generous. The first crack in his confidence came 2 weeks after Ellen left. During a meeting with a key client, a tech entrepreneur he'd courted for months, the client casually mentioned Margaret Ellison, the late textile tycoon. A loss for the industry, he said, heard her will was a shocker, left everything, over $50 million, to a nurse. Rare kind of nobility these days. Nathan felt a chill. The name rang a bell. Ellen had mentioned her occasionally, the reclusive patient she'd cared for over years, but the connection seemed absurd, a wild coincidence. He forced a smile, changed the topic, but the nurse's anonymity and the staggering sum gnawed at him. Confirmation came in a mundane, devastating way. A colleague showed him an online society column. It discussed the Ellison Foundation's new direction, mentioning the heir, Nurse Ellen Harper, now joining the board. The small photo was unmistakable. It was Ellen, but not his Ellen. This woman had a different haircut, a poised stance, a gaze not of exhaustion but of serene power. Nathan's world collapsed. His breath caught. 60 million. The woman he'd evicted, called Deadweight, imagined scraping by, was one of the richest women in the country. The irony was crushing, nauseating. Every insult, every dismissive word he'd spoken echoed back as his own stupidity. The condo, he'd claimed, the lifestyle he boasted of building, was dust compared to her fortune. His first reaction was denial, then blind rage. Rage at her for hiding this. How dare she not tell him? His warped logic painted him as the victim, betrayed by her simplicity. Then panic set in, with greed close behind, a desperate urge to undo his catastrophic mistake. He grabbed his phone, hands shaking, her number. He called, once, twice, 3 times, straight to voicemail. Her voice, recorded months ago, was calm and distant, a ghost from a past he'd destroyed. He sent texts. The first, curt. "Ellen, we need to talk. Urgent." No reply. An hour later, feigning concern, "Heard what happened. I'm shocked. Why didn't you tell me? I'm worried about you." Her silence was a wall of ice. By day's end, his third text was pathetic. "Babe, I know I messed up. I was stressed, said things I didn't mean. I miss you. The condo's so empty without you." In the days that followed, Nathan unraveled. The arrogant lawyer became an obsessed man. He called from different numbers, left long, pleading voicemails. His narrative shifted. Contrite husband, then business partner seeing opportunities. He sank to offering what he'd once deemed humiliating. "You can come back, babe, take our bedroom. I'll sleep in the office, no problem. We just need to be together." And the most absurd, that kind of money can be overwhelming. "I'm a lawyer. I can help you manage it. To protect you." Ellen, in her new Bellevue home, saw the notifications pile up. Missed calls, message previews. She felt no anger, no vengeful glee, just a clinical detachment, like observing a case study in human nature. Nathan's transformation didn't surprise her. It confirmed his love was never for her, but for what she provided. First stability, now the mirage of her wealth. With her new financial advisor, a sharp woman named Deborah, Ellen built an impenetrable barrier. She got a new phone number for her new life, keeping the old one active but muted, a silent archive of Nathan's desperation. Her silence was her strongest weapon. Each unanswered call, each ignored text, was an assertion of her new reality. She didn't need to shout or confront him. Her absence and silence were the mirror, forcing Nathan to face his error and his smallness. He hadn't just lost her, he'd thrown away his own fortune. Now he was alone in the condo he'd stolen, a pitiful king of a crumbling empire, while she, the exiled queen, built a new one in silence. Ellen's silence was a power Nathan, in his arrogance, couldn't counter. Used to winning arguments with legal prowess and intimidation, he was defenseless against her indifference. Weeks turned into a month, and her lack of response began to erode his sanity. He lost weight, slept poorly, and his once flawless work faltered. His obsession with Ellen and her fortune became his only drive. Meanwhile, Ellen thrived. Her Bellevue home, with its soothing fountain, became her sanctuary. For the first time in decades, she had time to read books she'd always wanted, listen to music, stroll her tree-lined neighborhood unhurried. Time to think. Her team, led by the assertive Deborah and the steady Mr. Bennett, shielded her from the outside world as she grew stronger within. During one meeting, reviewing Margaret's assets, a document caught Ellen's eye. The deed to the condo she'd shared with Nathan. Deborah, sharp as ever, cut to the chase. "Ellen, this property's in Nathan's name, but every payment, down payment, mortgage until it was paid off, came from your personal account. We've got a paper trail cleaner than a surgical suite." Mr. Bennett adjusted his glasses, adding, "Legally, the property belongs to the name on the deed, but we have ironclad proof you funded it entirely. In court, we could strongly argue for full reimbursement or even void the title, citing fraud or unjust enrichment on his part." Ellen listened quietly. A public courtroom battle, a drawn-out spectacle, didn't appeal to her. It wasn't her way. Revenge wasn't the goal. Justice was. That condo wasn't just property. It was the ultimate symbol of her sacrifice and his betrayal, bought with the sale of her parents' home, her grueling shifts. The thought of Nathan enjoying it as a trophy of his cruelty was a wound still raw. "I don't want the money back," Ellen said firmly. "And I don't want years in court. I want something simpler, more valuable to me. I want him to admit the truth." Deborah and Bennett exchanged a look, understanding the depth of her wish. It wasn't about money, it was about dignity. "Is there a way to do this without a lawsuit?" Ellen asked. "We can try an extrajudicial notice," Bennett explained. "We present him with all the evidence, bank statements, payment records, and propose a settlement, a document where he publicly acknowledges you alone funded the condo. In return, we agree not to sue. For a lawyer like him whose career hinges on reputation, a fraud or enrichment lawsuit would be catastrophic. He might choose private humiliation over public ruin." The plan was set. Ellen didn't want the condo back. She wanted to strip him of the lie he'd built his false empire on. The notice arrived at Nathan's office in a plain envelope, delivered by a process server. Reading it, he felt the ground vanish again. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation or peace. It was a precise surgical strike at his professional core. Copies of bank statements, dates, amounts, a relentless ledger of his dependence and her generosity. The document was a legal masterpiece. It didn't threaten outright, but the implications were clear. His prized career, built on an image of success and integrity, was in the crosshairs. A scandal like this would make him a pariah in legal circles. Clients would flee, colleagues would scorn him. He, who'd called Ellen a financial burden, would be exposed as the true parasite. Panic gave way to cold calculation. He could fight, drag it out for years, spend a fortune on lawyers, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd lose, and lose everything. His reputation. The alternative was to swallow his pride, sign and end it. A bitter pill, but one that might let him survive. He tried one last move, calling Bennett to negotiate, argue. The attorney's response was polite but unyielding. "Mr. Caldwell, my client's offer is final. There's no room for negotiation. The alternative is litigation, and I believe you understand the potential consequences." Cornered, humiliated, defeated, Nathan gave in. The signing was scheduled at Bennett's office. Ellen insisted on being there, not for revenge but to witness the closing of that chapter. When she entered the meeting room, Nathan barely recognized her. Gone was the weary nurse he'd dismissed. Ellen wore a crisp linen suit, her hair flawless, her posture radiating calm authority that intimidated him. She didn't look at him with hate, but with a distant neutrality that was far worse, the gaze of someone observing something irrelevant. He tried to speak, to mumble an apology, but his voice failed. Her presence, combined with the humiliation of what he was about to do, paralyzed him. Bennett placed the document on the table. "Read carefully, Mr. Caldwell. This is a declaration acknowledging the origin of funds. By signing, you attest that Ms. Ellen Harper was the sole provider of funds for the purchase and payment of the property at such and such address." With trembling hands, Nathan took the pen. Each letter of his signature felt like a nail in his coffin. He wasn't just giving up a lie, he was admitting his fraud, his ingratitude, his moral failure. He was giving her the one thing she wanted, the truth. Ellen watched without reaction. When he finished, she stood, nodded to her attorney, and walked to the door. Her victory needed no speeches. The signed document spoke for itself. Leaving that office, she didn't just leave behind a broken man, but the last shadow of pain he'd caused. Justice for her wasn't retaliation, it was restoration. She'd reclaimed her story. With Nathan's signature on the document, a weight Ellen hadn't realized she still carried dissolved. Justice, in its purest form, wasn't about punishment, but about restoring truth. With truth restored, she felt free to look only forward. Margaret's fortune, initially an overwhelming responsibility, revealed its true nature, a chance to turn pain into purpose. Ellen had no interest in idle luxury. Decades in a public hospital had shaped her soul. She knew the system's cracks, her colleagues' daily struggles, the vulnerability of patients relying on care, driven more by vocation than resources. That was where her new power would find meaning. Her first step was diving into the Ellison Foundation's projects. Margaret had quietly funded small health initiatives. With Ellen on the board, the foundation gained new energy and direction. She wasn't a figurehead, she was a seasoned professional. In meetings, her insights came from experience, not reports. She spoke of the need for modern equipment in underserved clinics, mental health support for nurses, and humanizing care for the elderly. Her calm, confident voice carried the authority of someone who'd been on the front lines. But her involvement went beyond boardrooms. Ellen traveled, not to trendy resorts, but to America's overlooked corners she'd only heard about from patients. She visited rural clinics in Montana, Native American reservations in South Dakota, underfunded hospitals in Detroit. She traveled quietly, often with just a foundation assistant, talking to doctors, nurses, community health workers. She sat in crumbling clinics, listened to stories, understood needs. Each trip was a lesson, fueling her projects with reality and empathy. In a small town in West Virginia, she met Rachel, a woman in her early 40s working as a hospital janitor, dreaming of becoming a nurse. Rachel said she was too old to start, the costs too high, her kids needing her income. Her story hit Ellen hard, echoing her own passion for caregiving. She saw the barriers so many older women faced in reinventing themselves. That conversation on a park bench birthed her most personal initiative. Back in Bellevue, with her team's help, she created the Ellen Harper Scholarship. It targeted women over 35 from underserved communities wanting to study nursing. The scholarship covered tuition and provided a living stipend so they could focus on studies without financial strain. It wasn't just funding education, it was investing in dignity, in second chances. The program's news spread, and applications poured in, exceeding expectations. Ellen insisted on reviewing the essays, hearing the stories. Each woman she helped was a personal victory, a way to rewrite her own past. The nurse forced into retirement became a mentor, a catalyst for a new generation of caregivers. The woman once called deadweight was now the driving force behind dozens of women's dreams. Her personal life found a new rhythm. The Bellevue house, with its tranquil fountain, was her haven. She learned to tend the garden, finding joy in watching seeds sprout. She reconnected with old friends, those her hectic life had pushed away. They traveled together, laughed, shared secrets. Ellen discovered the joy of friendship without ulterior motives, rooted in affection and trust. One autumn afternoon, as she sipped tea on her porch, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. She answered, hearing a hesitant young voice. "Aunt Ellen." "It's Kayla." Kayla. Nathan's daughter from his first marriage. Ellen hadn't seen her in years. She was a teenager when Ellen and Nathan married, their relationship always distant, marked by a young girl's self-absorption. Ellen had always been kind, but never broke through. "Kayla, sweetheart, what a surprise." "How are you?" Ellen asked, her heart tightening with a mix of memories. Kayla's voice was thick with emotion. "I needed to talk to you. I heard everything. What my dad did, and what you did for him. For us. For so long. I was a selfish kid. I never thanked you, never saw you. I'm so sorry." Her words were raw, heavy with regret Ellen hadn't expected. "I found out the truth about the condo. His law school," Kayla went on, words spilling out. "He told me in a weak moment. I'm so ashamed, Ellen, of him and of myself for not seeing your worth. And I'm finishing high school, and I want to study nursing." Ellen sat silent, absorbing the irony and beauty of the moment. The daughter of the man who'd scorned her now wanted to follow her path. "I saw your scholarship program," Kayla said softly. "I'm not asking for it, I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know you inspired me. Your strength, your dignity. That's what I want to be." In that moment, Ellen felt the last knot of her past unravel. The anger, the hurt, transformed into deep compassion. She saw Kayla not as Nathan's daughter, but as a young woman seeking her way, inspired by the legacy Ellen was building. "Kayla," Ellen said, her voice gentle but firm. "Nursing is a beautiful, tough profession. If it's what you truly want, I'll support you. Not with the scholarship, but because you're part of my story. And everyone deserves a chance to follow their calling." Hanging up, Ellen gazed at her garden. The late afternoon sun painted the leaves golden. The fountain's melody was a constant song of renewal. She understood, with soul-warming clarity, that her greatest victory wasn't the millions in her account or the justice on paper. It was this, turning pain into healing, inspiring a new generation, forgiving not from weakness but from strength. It was reclaiming not just her identity, but her ability to love and connect, now on her own terms. She no longer lived for anyone else. She lived for herself, and in doing so, touched lives in ways she'd never imagined. In the peace of her garden, Ellen realized her true fortune wasn't the millions she'd inherited, but the courage to reclaim herself. She didn't need revenge to win. Her victory was quiet, steeped in the aroma of fresh coffee and the sound of the fountain, reminding her daily that life, like water, always finds a new path forward. If Ellen's journey of resilience and dignity touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like so others can be inspired by her story, and be sure to follow for more narratives like this. Until next time.